In 1 Samuel 12, we're looking at the handover between Samuel to Saul and the feelings that Samuel went through when he realized he was being superseded by someone else. And he had a human response to that, but the two things began to calm him down. The first was the feeling of identification with God's cause. They have not rejected you, Samuel, says God. They have rejected me. So if it was just Samuel's personal ambition, there's nothing to do about it. But Samuel really had God's best at heart. And so he didn't retreat into the sulks, because if you're part of God's cause, it lifts your own heart up, doesn't it? This is his business. This is his show. He is centre stage, not me. And if I get that wrong, I will be forever disappointed and self-important at the same time, even in my disappointment. And because of that, he felt God's heart with him. Imagine, God and you are on the same side, or you're on God's side. And so these people around might be rebellious or worldly or unspiritual or ignorant of God or irreverent. No, we want a king like the other nations. Well, do you not see what you're asking? I've made you a king. I've set a king over you, he says in verse 1 of chapter 12. So he kept his peace because he felt God's heart beating with his heart. And he even kept his joy, really. You remember when Jonah, when his prediction was nullified, he just sulked under his bush. But Samuel could have retired hurt, and when things went wrong with Saul, he could have just smiled a smile of secret pleasure, of grim satisfaction. I told you so. I told you you needed me. But what does he do? He goes like a man into the needs of the moment, and he honours Saul. He lifts him up. It's a wonderful, wonderful picture. Samuel's plans are frustrated. Well, bad as they are, he's going to make the best of it. He's going to transfer his support to this man. Samuel is a giant. He led the faith of the whole country. You remember him growing up, serving Eli in tiny details, arranging the sanctuary, getting things right in tiny because God starts you off with a bike. Do you hear it? He gives you a bike to play with before he trusts you with a Jaguar. He wants you to be faithful with small things before he lets you onto something big and powerful. Samuel had started small. He dedicated his life to serving God. His mother had dedicated him to serving God, you remember? And he took on more and more responsibility, and he became the voice of God's justice in a whole country. But now he's out. He has no role. He can advise the king. He can superintend public life, festivals. We hear about him mentoring a school, or maybe a prophetic school. It's all real life stuff, and I don't think that God has any time for a kind of sacred, secular split. Like a priest is doing holy things and a policeman is doing secular things. Obviously, God's got no time for that. You spend 1 hour serving the Lord and then 167 hours being a narrow-minded hypocrite every week. Does that work for you? I hope not. No, me neither. Me neither. So religion can't be stuck in a box. So Samuel was involved in real life change. Oh, no. What is worldliness, do you think? Is it meddling with so-called worldly things, or is it meddling with a worldly spirit? Okay, if you make that separation, it means that your faith, your spiritual life, is a pale, stunted thing happening in corners. So just think about what Samuel did. He didn't retreat into his own little sphere of being an amiable ecclesiastic. He didn't write a book about it. He treats the one who's replaced him generously and courteously. He makes him go before him up to the feast. He gives him the choicest cut of the meat. He puts him center stage. This is Saul. He anoints him. And he invites other people, even if they have their own private misgivings. That's put there too. And he celebrates this man. It's a deep kind of courtesy, not dependent on how rich or important you are, but it's kind. It's kind. And it's interesting, once Samuel had to depose Eli, now he has to depose himself. Oh, and he did it by elevating Saul above himself. You see, one's a worldly spirit that makes you sulk. The other's a godly spirit that makes you put another one. Do you have the grace to allow yourself to be superseded? John the Baptist said, "He must increase and I must decrease." And truly, I have to decrease if the Son of God living in me is going to increase. Amen? There are only two ways. It can either be my will be done or thy will be done. And Samuel managed in this moment of crisis to handle the transfer graciously, humbly, lovingly, and to put this man in his place. He did the best he could in a very difficult situation. I just pray I've got the grace when my turn comes to hand over the baton to somebody who is even more witty, charming, beautiful than I am. I just pray I've got the grace to see that we are all servants in God's picture and that God is ultimately centre stage. There can only be one Lord. Amen. God bless.